You know what anxious attachment is. You've probably read about it. Maybe you've been in therapy. Maybe you've done the work, journaled, reflected, sat with the uncomfortable stuff, and yet here you are again. Same feeling, same dynamic, different person, same story. And the question that keeps coming up is, if I understand this so well, why does it keep happening? That question deserves a real answer, not a reassuring one, a real one. Because the assumption buried inside it is worth looking at. The assumption that understanding something should be enough to change it. And that's where most people get stuck. Not because they haven't done enough work, but because they've been doing a specific kind of work and expecting it to produce something it was never designed to produce. Understanding tells you what's happening. It doesn't automatically change what you do when it's happening. Those are two very different things. And confusing them is one of the most common reasons intelligent, self-aware people stay stuck in patterns they can fully explain. Let me say that again, because it's important. You can have complete insight into a pattern and still be completely pulled by it. Insight and change are not the same process. One happens in your mind, the other happens in your nervous system, in your body, in the moment when everything activates and the thing you know intellectually suddenly feels completely irrelevant. This is something I see constantly when I'm working with people. Someone who can describe their attachment style in detail, who knows exactly why they do what they do, who could probably explain it better than most therapists, and who still finds themselves doing it. So let's talk about why. Because there are three things that keep this gap open. Three reasons why knowing isn't translating into changing. And once you see them, you stop blaming yourself for not being further along. The first is that knowledge lives in a different place than the pattern. When you read about anxious attachment, you're engaging your thinking mind, the part of you that understands, categorizes, makes sense of things. But the pattern doesn't live there. It lives somewhere older, somewhere that formed before you had language for any of this. When someone pulls away, when there's a shift in tone, when a message goes unanswered for too long, something activates in you that isn't thinking, it's reacting. And that reaction was wired in long before you ever heard the word attachment. So when people say, I know better, but I still do it, what they're really saying is, my thinking mind knows better, but the part of me that's actually running the show in that moment doesn't speak the language of knowing. It speaks the language of experience, of repetition, of what has felt safe and familiar for a very long time. The second is that insight can actually become another way to avoid feeling. This one is subtle, but it's important. When you have a framework for what's happening, it's very easy to move into your head and stay there, to analyze the dynamic instead of feeling it, to understand why you're activated instead of sitting with the activation, to explain your behavior to yourself instead of letting yourself be moved by what's underneath it. And that's not weakness. That's actually intelligence doing what intelligence does, finding a way to manage something uncomfortable. But the pattern doesn't shift from being managed. It shifts from being felt, really felt, not performed, not processed out loud, not understood, actually felt and stayed with long enough to mean something. A lot of people have spent years developing insight as a sophisticated way of staying one step removed from their own experience. And the irony is, the more self-aware you are, the easier it is to do this without realizing it. The third is that change requires a different kind of practice than most people are doing. Reading about patterns is passive. Even therapy, for a lot of people, stays largely in the realm of talking and understanding. Both have real value, but neither of them is practice. Practice is what happens in the moment, when the activation is real, when the urge to text is right there, when the pull to shrink, to over-explain, to chase, to disappear into yourself is actually present and moving through you. That's when the pattern either continues or begins to shift. Not in the session, not afterward where you talk about what happened, but in the moment. And most people have never been taught what to do in that moment. They've been given understanding. They haven't been given a way to work with themselves when it actually counts. That's the gap. Not intelligence, not effort, not willingness. Just a missing piece in how change actually works. So if you've been frustrated with yourself, if you've wondered why knowing so much hasn't moved the needle the way you expected, this is why. You're not broken. You're not beyond help. You're not doing it wrong. You've just been working with one tool and wondering why it isn't doing the job of 3. Understanding is the beginning, not the destination. And if you want to go deeper into what that next layer actually looks like, the part that moves you from understanding into something that actually shifts, I've put together a worksheet inside the Transcendental Mentorship community that walks you through exactly this. It's free to access because insight without a place to apply it is just more of the same. The link is in the description. Deeper understanding, real change.